I'm speaking with Paromita Vohra, acclaimed documentary filmmaker and screenwriter from Mumbai, India. Paromita, welcome to Brandeis.
Thank you.
So what got you into screenwriting and filmmaking initially?
Well, I was a literature student and not very sure what I wanted to do. But basically just, by following one thing that I liked, leading to another thing that I liked. So after I finished my BA, I was thinking I would just study some more and be an academic. And one of my favorite teachers said to me, you have to go out in the world and see what you can do before you decide you want to just stay in here. So I went and studied communications, which was a new course at that time, when I was young, which was long ago. And then I discovered that, there was filmmaking, and inside filmmaking there was documentary. And for me, documentary felt like the perfect way in which you could combine both your creative and your political impulses. And people have a lot of stereotypes about what documentaries are, and people who fund documentaries would also like to force people into constrained ways of making films. But really, I was lucky to discover through people who came to college to show their films, or exposure to people working out in the world independently, that there's a huge range of practices in documentary. So it seemed like an exciting thing to get into. And I was foolish enough to try it young and luck out a bit.
Worked out. Yeah. Your works are particularly innovative for combining fiction and documentary. So is that part of how you see yourself contributing to documentary aesthetics?
I suppose whether you contribute to something or not is a retrospective thing. But at the time that I decided to combine the two, it was not even like I have decided to combine the two. But I just thought, oh, it'll be cool to do this. Because I think for my generation, we were living in a very different political context than the earlier generation of documentary filmmakers. I mean, politically, things had changed in India, and the audiences had altered. And I think, like in my 20s, I felt that the old language was insufficient to communicate the political complexities of our times. And I was very keen through documentaries to re-engage people in the political discussion, because people had become apathetic about politics. And so I felt like I needed a new language to talk about the things I wanted to talk about. And since I lived in Bombay and had to do a number of jobs to survive, those also became influences. I mean, whether it was Bollywood or music television or writing a soap opera or something, I felt like there is no difference actually between the reality of fiction and the reality of non-fiction. And some things, reality is not only what's around us outside, but also what we perceive, what's in our heads and hearts. And I just wanted to find a language that would combine both those things.
And you do that very effectively. Is there any resistance among among a kind of strict guard of documentary filmmakers? It feels like adding fiction is somehow lessening the documentary quality of it?
I think right at the beginning, I mean, one of the first films in which I did that was a film called Unlimited Girls. And I was very scared when it was time to show the film. I had a lot of fun making it. But then I was like, I know I'm going to get slammed. But that didn't happen. Actually, the great thing is that a lot of older filmmakers also were really excited and were happy that I had tried out this new thing. And there was definitely, there's always going to be somebody who will be a little orthodox or a little skeptical. And I know that one filmmaker felt like I was just making a masala documentary. And but over time, I think this is an understandable skepticism, because people are not sure if you're politically committed, or whether you're just coming around acting smart and playing with the form and then jazzing off to do something else. But I think over time, when you keep working and your body of work builds up to something consistent, then people respect it, even if they may or may not agree with it. And that's the main thing, that we have to coexist in our differences and our different approaches. So now I think now it's no longer something so unusual, and it's kind of makes you feel old to see younger filmmakers using some of the things that you might have done in your work. But it's nice to know that you're part of the bigger discussion about filmmaking practice, and that you're part of a generation of people or a group of people who are making the most exciting documentaries in the world right now, because that's what's happening in India, a new language of filmmaking that I don't think you see in other countries.
Really, so that's what I was going to ask you. It seems like a very exciting time to be a documentary filmmaker in India. It's a lot happening.
Yes, I think like right now there are hundreds of people working in documentaries, and one of the most difficult thing about working in documentaries is that it's completely independent. That means funding is not easily available, and distribution, all of those formal networks, which are available in limited amounts. I mean, it's not easy for anyone anywhere in the world to make documentaries. But say in Europe or the US, you do have television broadcast of documentary. There's a kind of space that's created. But actually the absence of those spaces has been the strength of documentary, because it's very independent and it's not constrained to that extent, and so people have experimented a lot, and because documentary filmmakers are directly engaging with their audiences, they also are responsive to that audience. And so what you see today is there must be, like, supposing there are 500 filmmakers working that one knows about, there must be like as many styles as there are filmmakers.
Wow.
And that is a vibrant, fantastic thing. Some things work, some things don't work, that doesn't matter. But there's a lot of experimentation, and there are no orthodoxies. That is what is really important to me. I think that now, because of that, Indian filmmakers are attracting some amount of foreign funding from European broadcasters, and that is creating a certain orthodoxy.
Right.
That's a pity, but you know, that's the wages of success for some people.
Right.
Maybe you have to be very strong to not choose that money.
Right.
But nevertheless, you know, there are all these opportunities, and I think it's unfortunate that many places abroad will not recognize Indian filmmaking as its own kind of film language.
Yeah.
But that's necessary to do, because it's language. I mean, everybody's is going to be different. There cannot be one orthodox language in the world for anything, right? At least to fall in the arts.
Yeah, and it sounds like to get recognized, you almost have to, codify it as a language, but you don't want to do that because it gets rid of all the experimentation and everything going on in the margins. Yeah.
And your individuality, right? If you're going to become like everybody else in order to be considered worth recognizing, then that recognition is not worthwhile, frankly. And you know, it's also important to know that you have an audience. Now, you're very lucky as a documentary filmmaker to be able to see that you have an audience. Of course, you don't have, it's easier to measure your success by awards or festivals or money, and that's not always available as a measure for you. But it's also important to change the paradigm of success, you know. You can't always look at success in those terms. But if you have reached out to a lot of people, and if today, through the internet, the amazing thing is that you get emails from people you've never met saying your work means a lot to me, and you think, okay, this is fantastic, and I have to value this as an important thing. Like money and travel and recognition of the formal kind is not the only thing that counts. Because if you don't believe in that, you're not going to change anything. You know, you're not going to do anything that matters, I feel.
Well, this issue of change and politics you mentioned earlier, I wanted to pursue a bit. You know, you're here under the Soli Sorabjee Lecture Series, which is co-sponsored by the Brandeis-India Initiative and the program in South Asian Studies. Soli Sorabjee, of course, was a prominent Indian jurist. How does your work relate to questions of justice, I guess most broadly defined?
Some of my earlier work, in fact, directly dealt with these ideas of law and justice, equality, through modernity, through tradition, etc. And I think that documentary of any kind actually is very important to the whole process of democracy, because it is about giving voice to people or ideas that are not in the mainstream, that the commercial mainstream does not feel is worth their while to do. But a democracy is not about commerce. Democracy is about people of different types contributing to the public discourse and counting in the public discourse. And I think that's the power of documentary filmmaking, that through either the subjects you choose or through the styles in which you choose to talk about known things, you continuously deepen and widen the public discussion. And only that can create a just society, because you're saying that the way one person is saying something is not the only way to look at something. So at its most simple level, I think documentary, of course, contributes directly to justice, because there are millions of films that are being made about the injustices done to tribal communities in Orissa, uranium mining, all of these things which are really directly affecting disadvantaged populations in India. And on the other hand, there is also great effort from other filmmakers, and I would say my work falls into that category, where you're trying to tell upper middle class, educated people who've benefited from democracy, from feminism, from every kind of progressive movement, to have great lives now, that you have to take this life to other people. It can't just be your life, or it will die with you. The thing that people don't realize is to do something for someone who's not related to you today is to do it for your children tomorrow. Because otherwise, really, the world will go back to its unjust state. And people who are directly connected to you will suffer in a way that you didn't suffer. So I think both things happen, that you bring one voice here, but you also try to make people listen in different ways and be invested in changing their own societies.
So is there this kind of, you articulated very well, I don't even want to call it politically engaged documentary filmmaking, because it sounds very sounds very obvious then, but there's a tradition of that in Indian documentary filmmaking. Who are your influences in that tradition, and who are the most important filmmakers in?
Well, in Indian documentary, interestingly, the most famous Indian documentary filmmaker, Anand Patwardhan, went to Brandeis.
Yes.
And I started out my career working as an assistant to him.
Oh, really?
But I won't count him as a direct influence in terms of my style. But, someone like Anand existing in India made it possible for all of us, because he was among the first, not the first, but amongst the first few people to do this kind of independent work. So it created a space and it created a visibility for this work, which all of us then went on to do. So in that sense, he has influenced every documentary filmmaker in India, There are a number of filmmakers doing a more reflexive kind of work that I have liked a lot. There's Samira Jain in Delhi, who has made films about craftspeople in Old Delhi and the passing of a certain context in cities. There's Reena Mohan, who made a great movie called Kamlabai about the first woman to act on the Indian screen. Great movie. There are filmmakers in other parts of South Asia whose work I like a lot also, like Kesang Seten in Nepal. But I think one's influences are diverse. The tradition of Indian documentary filmmaking has been great for me also in an unexpected way. That is Films Division, which is the government body which makes the most horrible films. Still had a few filmmakers who did amazing work. And one of them is SNS Shastri, who worked in the 60s. Really wonderful work. I saw his films first when I was in my mid-30s, and I was so sorry I hadn't seen it when I was 22, because I just feel it saved me a lot of time. And outside India too, there have been great filmmakers like this Agnes Varda in France, and Jean Rouch before her, Chris Marker. I mean, these are great documentary filmmakers, with hugely compassionate, humorous, and politically strong, very politically honest vision. That they don't make films that are just in a political formula, but there's a genuine political engagement, understanding of justice and humanity that informs their filmmaking, which I find great. Like, it's uplifting to see their films.
Great. So then I wanted to ask you, you are a documentary filmmaker, you make, artistic films, you're very independent, but you don't seem to have the same kind of snobbery towards popular film that we see among intellectuals and the elite in urban India. For instance, how do you reconcile that? How do you see the continuities or even the place of melodramatic film in Bollywood in Indian society today?
Well, first of all, I guess I'm not an elite, so I mean, I did not.
You're an intellectual.
I'm an intellectual now.
You're an artist intellectual.
I was not born.
I would put you in the elite category, but not fine.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't come from.
Right.
A lot of people in India who actually have worked in the arts and in the world of ideas have come from a certain social and political elite, even if they were not wealthy.
Right.
And I guess later on, like a few generations down from independence, people like me who come from regular middle class families got more involved in all of this. But I didn't really grow up with any particular sort of developed exposure to the arts. It was very random. Sometimes you'd be experiencing some really high art, but then you'd also be going to see the movie in the theater and watching the Sunday Bollywood movie and all of that. So I guess it's all, that no matter what anybody says, Indian film songs and Indian films are a very strong part of the emotional landscape for Indians. And if you have responded to it emotionally, you have no business to look down on it, I think. And there's no reason why it can't be part of your own language. So for me, I find it actually vibrant and interesting language. And I think it's very connected to the way Indians are, because their emotions are like that. There are many types of Indians, so it's hard to generalize. But Indians are, by and large, melodramatic, generous, hospitable, quick to get angry, quick to wound each other, quick to take offense, quick to give offense, all of that.
And quick to recover and have a happy ending.
Yes. So yes, I think that's part of that reality has got to be in films, I feel.
Do you have a favorite Bollywood film?
That's hard.
Do you have a couple of favorites? Or
I have a few favorites.
Top
I love Chalbaz. I love Jaane Bhi Do Yaro. Well, everybody loves it. I quite love Devdas. But actually, I like anything that Shah Rukh Khan is in, even though the film is rotten, just because Shah Rukh Khan is
so you've committed your allegiances here.
Yes.
So you like the new Devdas?
I thought it was quite like feminist.
Yeah?
Yeah, and I thought it was very unusual for an Indian film because, you know, normally in Hindi films people suffer a lot, right? And they suffer silently. But in Devdas, nobody suffers silently. Everybody's telling each other off. And that was the thing I really liked about the movie.
Yeah, it was almost a film about Bollywood. I mean, everything was so stylized and so performed that it was a film about itself. I think made it fascinating.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. So that would put you and me in the rare minority of people who actually liked 2002. So I just have one last question, which is, you know, a lot of our students at Brandeis are, you know, interested in film and interested in pursuing film, but obviously share some of the concerns that you mentioned early. How is this? You know, how can I embark upon a career that's so precarious, and increasing pressure to find stability in this, you know, economic period. Do you have any advice or something you would give them, something inspiring that might you would suggest?
I mean, I would suggest that if they want to make money, they should not do this.
Okay.
Because it's not a like highly paid profession, and it will never be. You can be in the mainstream, and if you're lucky, you'll make it big, right? But even in Bollywood or Hollywood or any big film industry, for all the people who are successful, there are thousands who are struggling for like years till they're like 50 years old. But I feel that if you don't have fear, then you should do it. Because eventually stability does not come from getting a pay packet. It comes from finding people like yourself who believe in these things and slowly expanding that community of people. And that brings a stability, and it brings work, and it makes the work that you're doing more meaningful, and slowly it becomes sustainable. Like for me, when I started out, my parents were very alarmed by my choices, and they were worried for my financial future, and they were right. It was quite hard in the beginning. But all I can say is that you know, when you keep on doing it, eventually it works out. Now, if you'll never get rich, but I do perfectly okay. And I think everybody does if they keep on doing what they're doing, because there is a place for everything in the world, or you can make a place for it.
Well, with that, thank you very much. I very much appreciate you spending some time to talk with us.
Thank you very much.